He said I wasn't good enough. Seraphina Vance stared at the amber liquid swirling in her glass. Fourth one. Or fifth. The ice had melted somewhere around number 3, and now it was just lukewarm whiskey. Much like her life. Lukewarm. Hoy. Disappointing. Not good enough. 12 years, she said, not caring that the bartender was the only other soul in the bar, at 2 in the morning. 12 years of dating, and he married the intern, a 22-year-old intern who's been at the company for 3 months. The bartender, a tired-looking man in his 50s, wiped a glass and said nothing. He had heard this story before. Different woman, same ending. The Ember bar was nearly empty now. Just her, the bartender, and a man in a white shirt sitting in the furthest corner, shrouded in shadow. He wasn't drinking. He was just sitting there, one hand pressed to his chest, staring out the rain-streaked window. The dim amber sconces caught the edge of his jaw, sharp as a blade, and the strange color of his eyes. Amber. Not brown, not hazel. Amber, like fossilized sunlight. Had she been more sober, Seraphina Vance would have noticed the faint red veins pulsing beneath his skin, glowing like lava through cracks in cooling stone. But she wasn't sober. She had lost everything tonight. Her fiancé announced his engagement to another woman at the family dinner. Her family dinner. And her father had told her, in front of everyone, that she was the shame of the Vance name. She had nothing left to lose. Hey! She waved unsteadily at the man in the corner. You. Pour me another. Nyai. He turned his head slowly, as if emerging from a deep trance. His eyes fixed on her, and something flickered there. Something she couldn't name. He looked at her, then at the bartender who was now busy restocking glasses in the back. A long hesitation. Then he rose. He was tall. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, even sitting on the bar stool. White shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. No tie. The cuffs were embroidered with silver thread in a pattern she didn't recognize. The watch on his wrist, she didn't know the brand, but it looked like it cost more than her annual salary. He stepped behind the bar, found a bottle of Macallan, and poured her 2 fingers. His hand trembled slightly as he set the glass down. Not from alcohol, he hadn't touched a drop. From something else. Something that made the veins on his forearm glow faintly orange. You're not the bartender. She squinted at him. No. Then why are you pouring me a drink? His lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Because it looks like you need a friend more than a drink. Seraphina Vance let out a laugh. It came out wrong. Too loud. Too bitter. The kind of laugh that ends in tears if you're not careful. A friend? I just got publicly humiliated by my entire family. My father disowned me. My boyfriend of 12 years is marrying someone else. A friend is the absolute last thing I need right now. None. He didn't flinch at her outburst. He just stood there, watching her with those impossible amber eyes, waiting. When she finished, he asked, very quietly, "Then what do you need?" The question hung in the air. What did she need? She had spent 22 years being what everyone else needed her to be. The perfect heiress. The obedient daughter. The patient girlfriend. And where had it gotten her? One night, she blurted out. One night where I don't have to think. One night where I'm not the shame of the Vance name. One night where someone looks at me and sees something other than a disappointment. No. The man was silent for a long moment. His hand, still resting on the counter, trembled again. The glow beneath his skin brightened, then dimmed, like a heartbeat made of fire. He was fighting something. She could see it in the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw clenched. But she didn't know what. Finally, he set the whiskey bottle down. I have a hotel room next door. He didn't tell her he'd come to this bar tonight because he couldn't bear another full moon alone in his penthouse. Didn't tell her that for 10 years. Since the night his father burned to ash in front of his 15-year-old eyes, fire had been eating him alive from the inside. Didn't tell her that tonight was the night he'd planned to surrender. To let the curse finish what it started. He told her none of this. He just held out his hand. And when her fingers touched his, When skin met skin for the first time, something impossible happened. The fire in his chest went silent. For the first time in 10 years, the burning stopped. Not faded. Not eased. Stopped dead, as if someone had thrown a switch. The agony that had been his constant companion for a decade vanished. Damien Drake froze, his hand still wrapped around hers, his heart hammering against his ribs for an entirely new reason. "Are you okay?" Seraphina Vance tilted her head, her alcohol-blurred eyes trying to focus on his face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Nothing." His voice came out rough, scraped, raw. "I'm fine." He didn't let go of her hand. They walked through the hotel lobby in silence. The corridor was lined with dark red carpet, wall sconces casting pools of gold light along their path. Seraphina Vance's heels wobbled on the plush carpet, and when she stumbled, he caught her. One arm around her waist, pulling her upright before she could fall. Their faces were inches apart. She looked into his eyes, amber, but no longer distant. Something burned beneath the surface now. Something hungry. Something that had been starving for 10 years and had just caught the scent of food. "I don't know your name," she whispered. "Damien. Duh. Sierra." He didn't ask for her last name. She didn't offer it. The less they knew about each other, the easier it would be to pretend this night never happened. The hotel room was vast, far too expensive for a bartender's salary, she thought vaguely, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a living painting. Neon lights painted ribbons of blue and violet across the walls. Damien didn't turn on the lights. He just stood at the threshold, one hand still pressed to his chest, frozen at the edge of a cliff. But Seraphina Vance, the woman who had just lost everything, had no hesitation left. She stepped forward and placed her palm flat against his chest. Right where the dragon scale scar was, glowing now beneath his shirt, orange-red like magma seeping through cracks in the earth. "Hot," she murmured. "It always is." His voice caught in his throat. Until what? He didn't answer with words. He leaned down, and his lips found hers. The kiss was slow at first. Tentative. Two strangers testing the water, each carrying wounds the other couldn't see. His hand slid into her hair, and his fingers were trembling. Not from desire. From relief. From the impossible, overwhelming sensation of his body not being at war with itself. For Seraphina Vance, that kiss was surrender. She didn't have to be perfect. Didn't have to be the Vance heiress. Didn't have to be anything except what she was, a woman who had been told she wasn't enough. Finally feeling like she was. When his shirt fell to the floor, she saw the full extent of the scar. It wasn't a single mark. It was an entire web of glowing veins spreading across his left chest, like cracks of lava across a dying world. She should have been afraid. Any sane person would have been afraid. But she reached out and traced each line with her fingertip, and beneath her touch, the veins changed color. From blazing red to deep orange. From orange to gold. From gold to nearly extinguished. "What are you doing?" His voice broke on the last word. "I don't know." But she knew one thing. No one had ever seen these scars and stayed. She was here. Drunk, wounded, terrified, but she was here. And she wasn't running. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all, and laid her on the bed. City lights streamed through the window, tracing ribbons of light across their bodies. When they came together, there was a moment. A single heartbeat. When his eyes met hers, and in those amber depths, she saw something that stole her breath. Recognition. As though he had been waiting for her for a very long time. Since before he was born. Since before the first dragon drew breath. Afterward, she rested her head on his chest, right where the scars had faded to pale silver lines, barely visible. She didn't know what she had just done. She only knew that for the first time in years, she didn't feel hollow. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. She wanted to ask what he was thanking her for, but sleep had already pulled her under. The next morning, Seraphina Vance woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. The man beside her was still asleep, his face younger in repose, the hard edges softened. The scars on his chest had returned, but they were fainter than before. She stared at him for a long moment. Then panic hit. What had she done? Last night she'd had nothing left to lose. But this morning she still had one thing: her self-respect. And the last shred of it was telling her to run before she made this worse. Quietly, she gathered her clothes. She found a scrap of hotel notepaper and a pen. Her handwriting was shaky, still half drunk, or maybe just terrified. Thank you for last night. Sorry for the trouble. S. No full name. No phone number. Just an initial. She slipped out the door and didn't look back. The door had barely clicked shut when Damien opened his eyes. He had been awake since the moment she stirred. But he hadn't stopped her, because something else was more important. For the first time in 10 years, the fire in his chest had gone out. He read her note. S. No name. No number. Just the shaky handwriting of a woman who was running from something much bigger than a one-night stand. He didn't know this was the first bond, the beginning of a connection that could either save him or destroy them both. All he knew was that this woman was the answer, and he would find her. No matter how long it took. But even as he folded the note and tucked it into his pocket, he felt it. A faint warmth kindling in his chest. Not the full fire, not yet. But the embers were stirring. The first bond only worked while they were together. Now that she was gone, the curse was waking up. And when the next full moon rose, it would come back fiercer than ever before, because his body had tasted release, and it would never be satisfied with anything less. Wrong. Do it again. A 30-page report slammed onto Seraphina Vance's desk with enough force to scatter her neatly arranged pens across the floor. She didn't flinch. She didn't sigh. She simply nodded, gathered the scattered pens, and pulled the report toward her. Third time this week, came a whisper from the next desk. Miles Carter, her only friend in the entire 12-floor branch of Dragon Holdings, leaned over his cubicle wall, his expression a mixture of sympathy and exasperation. That report was correct. I checked it myself. Victoria Crane is deliberately messing with you. Yeah. Then I'll do it a fourth time. Seraphina Vance powered on her computer, fingers already moving across the keyboard. And a fifth. And a sixth. She'll get bored eventually. You enjoying the abuse or something? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes fixed on the screen. Revenue projections, expense reports, next quarter's growth targets. Numbers she had memorized weeks ago. Numbers that were perfectly, indisputably correct. But Victoria Crane was the head of administration, and what Victoria Crane wanted, Victoria Crane got. I'm not here to play office politics, Seraphina Vance said finally. I'm here to survive. 3 years ago, she had walked away from a penthouse apartment with a view of the entire city, an unlimited black card, and the title of heiress of House Vance. 3 years ago, her father had stood in the grand foyer of their family estate and told her, in front of 200 guests, that she was no longer his daughter. 3 years ago, she had done the most reckless thing of her life, a night with a stranger in a hotel room, and then vanished entirely. She used a shortened name now. Seraphina instead of Seraphina Vance. She rented a 200-square-foot studio in District 8, with a window that looked directly into the brick wall of the next building. She had started as an unpaid intern and clawed her way up to administrative assistant, still the bottom of the food chain, but every single cent she earned was hers. Not her father's. Not her family's. Hers. Miles wasn't done. Victoria's been extra vicious lately. Did you notice the bruises on her wrists? They're getting worse. Me. Seraphina Vance had noticed. Strange. Dark marks spreading beneath Victoria Crane's skin, like blood vessels dying in slow motion. She spent a lot beyond her salary too. New designer bags every week. And she took suspiciously long lunch breaks, always slipping into the stairwell with her phone pressed to her ear. But that was none of Seraphina Vance's business. I don't care about Victoria's wrists, she said. I care about keeping my job. Victoria Crane swept past at that exact moment, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and barely contained malice, and accidentally tipped her coffee cup. Hot liquid splashed across Seraphina Vance's desk, soaking the freshly printed report. "Oh my God!" Victoria Crane pressed a hand to her chest in mock horror. "I'm so clumsy today." "I'm terribly sorry." Seraphina Vance grabbed a handful of tissues and began wiping her desk. Her expression didn't change. "It's fine." Victoria Crane's smile slipped for just a fraction of a second, the barest flicker of frustration that her target wasn't reacting. Then it was back, bright and poisonous. "Make sure that report is on my desk by 5. The CEO is visiting tomorrow, and I want everything perfect." She swept away. Miles made a rude gesture at her retreating back. "If I were you," he said, "I'd have slapped her by now. If I slap her, I lose my job. And I need this job." No one. What Seraphina Vance didn't say, what she never said, to anyone, was that this job wasn't just about money. It was about proving something. To her father, who had called her worthless. To her ex-fiancé, who had traded 12 years for a 22-year-old intern. To herself, mostly. That she could build something from nothing. That she wasn't the failure they all believed her to be. At 4:45 she placed the revised report on Victoria Crane's desk. Every number was correct. Every page was pristine. Not a single coffee stain. Victoria Crane barely glanced at it. "Fine. You can go." "Yeah, may I?" As Seraphina Vance turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Victoria Crane's phone screen. A message from an unsaved number. Progress report. "Status?" Victoria Crane typed back quickly, then locked the screen. When she looked up and saw Seraphina Vance still standing there, her eyes narrowed. "Something else?" "No. Have a good evening." Seraphina Vance walked back to her desk, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. Something about that message, about the way Victoria Crane's fingers had flown across the screen with practiced urgency, felt wrong. But she had bigger things to worry about. At 5 o'clock sharp, an internal email went out to all employees. CEO Damien Drake will conduct a branch inspection tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. All employees must be present, in proper attire, at their designated stations. The office erupted. "CEO Drake is coming here? To this branch? I heard he's incredibly handsome. Handsome, but terrifying. They say he's never smiled once in his entire career." Seraphina Vance didn't join the chatter. She packed her bag, said goodbye to Miles, and took the bus home to her tiny studio in District 8. She made instant noodles, watched the rain streak down her single window, and tried very hard not to think about tomorrow. She had no idea that tomorrow would be the day everything changed. No idea that Damien Drake was a name she already knew, from a bar at 2 a.m, 3 years ago, when she was drunk and broken and desperate. No idea that the man she'd been running from for 3 years was about to walk through the door. The lobby of Dragon Holdings had never been this quiet. Employees lined up in 2 perfectly straight rows, backs rigid, hands clasped in front of them. Even the branch manager, normally imperious, a man who had never spoken below a shout, stood at attention like a soldier awaiting inspection. The air was so taut you could have plucked it like a guitar string. Seraphina Vance stood at the very back, tucked behind Victoria Crane, who had spent the entire morning perfecting her makeup in the bathroom mirror. She had tried to position herself as far from the front as possible. A low-level administrative assistant didn't need to meet the CEO. She just needed to exist. To be invisible. Exactly at 9 o'clock, the elevator doors opened. The first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the silence of the lobby. That had been there before. The silence that fell when the man stepped out. A deeper quiet, as if the very air had stopped moving. The second thing she noticed was his footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Each one echoed on the marble floor like a metronome. The third thing she noticed, and this one made her blood run cold, was his voice. "Good morning." 2 words. 2 ordinary words that every CEO says during every inspection. But the moment they reached her ears, Seraphina Vance felt the floor drop out from under her. She knew that voice. She had heard it in a bar at 2 in the morning. She had heard it whisper her name, not her full name, just Sarah, in a hotel room lit by city lights. She had heard it say thank you, soft as a prayer, pressed into her hair as she fell asleep. She looked up, and the world stopped. Damien Drake. The amber eyes. The blade-sharp jaw. The faint scar on his left chest, hidden now beneath a perfectly tailored black suit and a platinum tie, but she knew it was there. She had traced every line of it with her fingertips. She had watched it change color beneath her touch, from blazing red to gold, to nearly gone. The bartender from that night was the owner of the entire company. No. This couldn't be happening. Seraphina Vance lowered her head so fast her neck cracked. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was certain the entire lobby could hear it. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her mind was screaming at her feet to move, to run, to do what she had always done best, disappear. But her feet were nailed to the floor. Damien moved down the line, shaking hands with each employee. His expression was unreadable, cold stone, carved by a master sculptor. The branch manager stammered something about quarterly projections. Damien nodded without appearing to hear a word. He was getting closer. Victoria Crane preened, adjusting her blouse. The branch manager was still talking. 10 employees away. 5. Nimdan. Saying. And then he stopped. Right in front of her. Time froze. The entire lobby fell into a vacuum. Victoria Crane's smile stiffened. The branch manager's mouth hung open mid-sentence. Every eye in the room fixed on the impossible sight of Damien Drake, the coldest CEO in the city, the man who had never smiled in his entire career, standing motionless before a low-level administrative assistant. He looked at her. Just looked. His amber eyes traced the line of her jaw, the fall of her dark hair, the proud set of her shoulders that were trembling, but not bowing. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. Seraphina Vance didn't breathe. She didn't blink. She stared at the knot of his tie, not his face. She couldn't look at his face, and prayed to every god she didn't believe in that he wouldn't recognize her. 3 years. She'd cut her hair shorter. She'd lost weight. She wore cheap office clothes now instead of designer dresses. Maybe he wouldn't. But even as the thought formed, she knew it was a lie. Because she had recognized him in an instant. And the way his hand, still extended from the previous handshake, had frozen mid-air, she knew he had recognized her too. Then he moved. A single step, past her, toward the next employee. The handshake continued. The inspection resumed. Seraphina Vance exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Her lungs burned. Her knees threatened to buckle. But she stayed upright. She had learned one thing in 3 years of surviving on her own. No matter how terrified you are, never let them see it. But as Damien reached the end of the line and turned toward the conference room, just before the door swung shut, he looked back. One glance. Directly at her. And that glance said exactly one thing. Your running ends here. At the far end of the corridor, Victoria Crane quietly pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved fast, the same practiced urgency Seraphina Vance had glimpsed the day before. Target confirmed. She's at the branch. The CEO has recognized her. Proceeding as planned. Yay. And Rain? Halwa. The recipient was an unsaved number. No name. No history. Just a blank contact with a string of digits that no reverse lookup could identify. Victoria Crane slipped the phone back into her pocket. The bruise-like marks on her wrists had spread further than they'd been a week ago, creeping up her forearms now, dark tendrils like dying vines. She tugged her sleeves down to cover them. She was running out of time. But so was everyone else. Seraphina Vance remained frozen in the lobby long after the inspection ended, long after her coworkers had dispersed back to their desks, with excited whispers about the CEO's piercing gaze and impossibly sharp jawline. She stood in the same spot, staring at the closed conference room door, and tried to remember how to breathe. He had recognized her. 3 years. 3 years of running, of hiding, of building a new life from the ashes of the old one. And in 3 seconds it had all come undone. She should run. She should quit. She should pack her tiny studio apartment tonight and disappear again, this time to a different city, maybe a different country. She had done it before. She could do it again. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she knew she wouldn't. Because running was what the old Seraphina Vance did. The heiress who let other people decide her worth. The woman who disappeared after a one-night stand because she was too scared to face what it meant. She wasn't that woman anymore. She had spent 3 years building something from nothing. And she would be damned if she let a man, any man, no matter how powerful, no matter how impossible, take that away from her. Still, when her phone buzzed with an internal message from the CEO's office, Ms. Seraphina, the CEO requests your presence on the 50th floor immediately. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely read the screen. The elevator ride to the 50th floor took 45 seconds. Seraphina Vance counted every one of them. She had prepared 3 scenarios in her head during the endless climb. Scenario 1, he didn't remember her. It was just a coincidence. She was one of hundreds of women he'd met. CEOs didn't remember one-night stands from 3 years ago. Scenario 2, he remembered but didn't care. She was an administrative assistant now. To a man like Damien Drake, she was beneath notice. Scenario 3, he remembered, he cared, and he was about to make her life a living hell. The elevator doors opened onto a corridor of black marble and floor-to-ceiling glass. The secretary's desk was empty, cleared out, as if someone had been instructed to leave. At the end of the corridor, double doors of dark wood stood slightly ajar. Seraphina Vance walked toward them on legs that didn't feel like her own. Her back was straight. Her chin was up. Whatever happened in that room, she would not bow. She had spent 3 years learning not to bow. She pushed open the door. The CEO's office was vast, larger than her entire apartment building, she thought bitterly, with windows that wrapped around 3 sides, offering a panoramic view of Asheville City, stretched out below like a glittering carpet. The furniture was minimalist, a desk of black glass, 2 leather chairs, a single bookshelf, filled with volumes that looked older than the building itself, and Damien Drake. Standing with his back to her, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the skyline. The door clicked shut behind her automatically. Silence stretched between them like a living thing. She could hear her own heartbeat. She could hear his breathing, slow, controlled, the breathing of a man who had spent years mastering every part of himself, except the one that was currently on fire. 3 years. His voice was low. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. The voice of a man who had been searching for something for so long that hope had become a foreign language. Do you have any idea how long I've searched for you? Seraphina Vance's throat closed up. Scenario 3. The worst one. Mr. Drake. She forced her voice steady. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just an administrative assistant. I don't know what you're. I hired 16 private investigators. He cut her off without raising his voice. 16. I followed every lead. Every scrap of information from that night. The hotel. The bar. The credit card you used, which wasn't yours, by the way. A card registered to Vance Industries, maxed out, and canceled the very next day. Yemen. She said nothing. She couldn't. It was her father's card, a final act of spite before she walked away forever. You erased yourself completely. No real name, just an initial. No address. No phone number. No employment records because you started working under a false name. You vanished as though you'd never existed at all. Nos. His voice cracked on the last word. Just slightly. Just enough for her to hear it. That night, Damien continued, turning now, slowly, as if the motion cost him something. I didn't go to that bar to drink. I went there because I couldn't endure another full moon alone with the fire in my chest. I went there to give up. Noi. Romantasy. He stepped closer. The amber eyes were fixed on her now, and they were not cold. They were burning. And then, you appeared. Drunk out of your mind, calling me a bartender. And somehow, I still don't understand how, you did what no one else could in 10 years. Another step. You extinguished the fire inside me. Man, you ruin. Seraphina Vance took a step backward. Her back hit the door. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just an ordinary person. I make coffee and file reports. I don't extinguish anything. Yun, do you mind? No. Damien stopped, exactly 1 arm's length away. Close enough that she could smell him, sandalwood and something else, something that smelled like ozone after a lightning strike. You're not ordinary, and I'm going to prove it. He unbuttoned the top of his shirt. Not all the way, just enough to reveal the scar. The dragon scale mark on his left chest, glowing now like embers fanned back to life. Seraphina Vance's eyes went wide. She had seen that scar before. She had traced it with her fingers 3 years ago in a hotel room. She had watched it change color beneath her touch, from red to orange to gold to almost nothing. And now it was blazing again, brighter than she remembered. What is that? The mark of the Draconis curse. He rebuttoned his shirt with deliberate, controlled movements. I am the 7th generation, HAA, long life, Gidindota. Dragon blood runs through my veins. Every full moon, fire burns me from the inside out, a curse that killed my father when I was 15. I inherited it the night he died. I've lived with it for 13 years. Nyan. Seraphina Vance's mind was reeling. Dragon blood. Curse. These were words from fairy tales. Not things that happened in boardrooms and corporate lobbies. And what did I do to you? I don't fully understand the mechanism. Damien moved toward the window, giving her space. Perhaps sensing that she was moments away from bolting. But there is something called the bond system. An ancient connection between the HIA long bloodline and those who carry the blood of the phoenix. When we touch, when our skin makes contact, the fire is suppressed. Temporarily. Only while we're together. And then he turned back to face her. That night 3 years ago was the first bond. It saved me, for one night. But when you left, the fire came back. Stronger than before. Because my body had tasted relief, and it would never be satisfied with less. Yun, Gandamzarn. Seraphina Vance's hand moved unconsciously to her left wrist. The birthmark. The red feather-shaped mark she had been born with, that her mother had called her lucky charm before she died. Your birthmark, Damien said, his voice dropping even lower. It's not a birthmark. It's the mark of the Phoenix bloodline. You are my fated one. Dara. The only person in the world who can break this curse. Nyoa, Adhani. The word fated, one, snapped something inside her. Don't call me that. Her voice came out sharper than she intended. I have a name. And I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be anyone's fate. Daughters you were. I know you were. I know. 3 years ago, I was drunk and broken, and I made a reckless decision. That doesn't make me your destiny. Name. Gikriel. I know. Then why are you doing this? Why did you drag me up here? Why didn't you just pretend you didn't recognize me, like everyone else does? Damien was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm dying. The words fell between them like stones into still water. The curse. I have 2 years, maybe less. And the only person in the world who can save me is standing in this room. Now. Auntie. He took a step toward her, but stopped short, respecting the invisible boundary she had drawn. Starting tomorrow, you'll be reassigned as my personal assistant. You'll work on this floor. Close to me. Nyawame. Han. Eind. That's not a request, is it? No. Che. Seraphina Vance's hands curled into fists at her sides. Her heart was pounding. Her mind was screaming. But beneath the fear and the anger, beneath all of it, something else was stirring. A strange warmth. A tiny spark, deep in her chest, that had nothing to do with the heating system. She didn't know what it was. She only knew it had never been there before. "You can't force me to be your cure," she said. "I'm not trying to." Damien turned back toward the window. "I'm trying to stay alive long enough to convince you that I'm worth saving." The elevator ride down was longer than the ride up. Or maybe it just felt that way. Seraphina Vance stared at her reflection in the polished steel doors. A woman with dark hair in a cheap ponytail, wearing an off-the-rack blouse, holding a coffee-stained report. But beneath her left sleeve, the birthmark was tingling. On Miller, Garrington. Alive. And for the first time in 3 years, Seraphina Vance wondered if she had been wrong about who she really was. The first week on the 50th floor was a study in controlled chaos. Seraphina Vance had expected hostility, or at least cold indifference. What she got was something far more disorienting. Professionalism. Damien treated her exactly like any other assistant. He gave her reports to file. He dictated emails. He requested coffee at precise intervals. Black, no sugar. He never once mentioned dragonfire, or curses, or the word destiny. But his eyes followed her everywhere she went. She felt it before she saw it, a prickle at the back of her neck, a warmth spreading through her chest. Every time she entered a room, his attention locked onto her like a compass needle finding north. And every time their paths crossed, reaching for the same document, passing in the doorway, the air between them crackled with something that made the birthmark on her wrist ache. By the 5th day, she couldn't take it anymore. "Aren't you going to explain?" Damien looked up from his documents. "Explain what?" "What you said. About the curse. About the phoenix. About why every time I'm in the same room as you, my wrist feels like it's on fire." "No." He set his pen down. For a long moment he just looked at her. And Seraphina Vance realized she had never seen anyone look so exhausted. Not tired. Exhausted. The kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from fighting a battle no one else can see. "The bond system," he said quietly, "is the only mechanism that can undo the Draconis curse. It has 3 stages. The first bond happened that night, 3 years ago, when we touched for the first time. It suppressed the fire temporarily. But the suppression only works while we're together. When you left." He paused. "The fire came back. Worse than before. Every full moon since that night has been agony on a scale I can't describe. And the second bond requires both of us to accept the connection consciously. If we do, the curse weakens significantly. The fire transforms from destructive to powerful. But it also emits a signal. Every dragon shifter within hundreds of miles will know our location." Seraphina Vance felt the blood drain from her face. "There are more of you. 3 great clans. The HIA Long, my bloodline. The HAC Long, the Obsidian clan, are ancient enemies. And the Thean Long, the Celestial clan, who have remained neutral for centuries. All of them would see us destroyed before allowing HNEA Long VE to complete the bond. And the third bond?" Damien's expression darkened. "No one has ever achieved it. The third bond requires both of us to fight together, to synchronize our power in a life-or-death situation. If we succeed, the curse is fully broken. But the energy released is immense. It would draw every dragon shifter in existence. Completing the third bond means declaring war on all of them at once." Silence filled the office. Outside, clouds drifted past the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shifting shadows across the black glass desk. Seraphina Vance's voice, when she found it again, was very small. "You're asking me to risk my life for a man I barely know." "No. Go window." Damien stood and walked around the desk, stopping an arm's length away, the same distance he had kept during that first confrontation. "I'm telling you the truth. All of it. What you do with that truth is your choice." If you walk out that door right now, never come back, I won't stop you. Ah. Aye. Wouldn't you die? Yes. The word hung between them. No drama. No manipulation. Just a simple statement of fact. But I've been dying for 13 years, Damien continued. I've made my peace with it. What I haven't made peace with is the thought of dragging an innocent woman into a war she never asked for. He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her wrist. His thumb brushed over the feather-shaped birthmark. This mark means you have phoenix blood. But it doesn't mean you owe me anything. Dying. Seraphina Vance looked down at his hand on her wrist. The birthmark was glowing now, faintly, a soft blue light she had never seen before. And the dragon scale scar on his chest, visible through the thin fabric of his shirt, was glowing in response. Orange. Gold. Colors shifting like a sunset. I've been running for 3 years, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. From my family. From my past. From myself. But I'm tired of running. Lying. She looked up and met his eyes. Those impossible amber eyes, burning with a fire she was only beginning to understand. I'm not promising anything. I'm not agreeing to be your fated one. But I won't run. Not this time. Evening. For the first time since she'd met him, in the bar, in the lobby, in this very office, Damien Drake's expression shifted. The cold mask cracked. Beneath it was something raw. Something terrified. Something that looked a lot like hope. That's more than I ever dared to ask for, he said. Seraphina Vance pulled her hand back, gently, not harshly. Tomorrow night is the full moon, isn't it? Yes. Then I'll be there. Not because you're forcing me. But because no one should have to face hell alone. Yamiel. Nidandiri. She turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused. And Damien? Don't ever call me fated one again. I have a name. Nyamatamben. Ama. The door clicked shut behind her. Damien stood alone in his office, the ghost of her touch still warm on his wrist. And for the first time in 13 years, he allowed himself to hope. The night of the full moon arrived faster than Seraphina Vance was ready for. She stood outside the door of Damien's penthouse, one hand raised to knock, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. The building was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you hyper-aware of every breath. The door was ajar. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness. The penthouse was vast, all open spaces and floor-to-ceiling windows that should have been flooding the rooms with moonlight. But the moon outside was full and bright, and still, the apartment was dark. As if something was swallowing the light. Then she heard it. A sound that made the hair on her arms stand up. Labored breathing. Low, animal, agonized. The sound of something suffering beyond the limits of endurance. An elderly man emerged from the shadows. White hair, kind eyes, a face lined with decades of worry. He wore a simple black suit, perfectly pressed, and moved with the quiet grace of someone who had spent a lifetime in service. Miss Moore. Seraphina. His voice was warm despite the circumstances. My name is Silas. I am the butler of House Drake. The young master is in the bedroom. I'm Manon and Shihira. What's happening to him? Silas's expression flickered. Grief, worry, and something that looked like hope, all passing across his face in the space of a heartbeat. Tonight is worse than ever. The first bond gave him a taste of relief, and now his body craves it tenfold. The curse is punishing him for daring to hope. Yolwyn. He stepped aside, gesturing toward a hallway, lit only by the faint orange glow seeping from beneath a closed door. I don't know if you can help him. But you are the only one who has ever made a difference. Please. And Seraphina Vance walked down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the darkness itself was pushing back against her. The orange glow grew brighter. Hotter. By the time she reached the door, the heat was intense enough to make her skin prickle. She pushed it open. Damien was on his knees in the center of the bedroom. His shirt was torn open, not removed, torn, as if he had clawed at it in desperation. His bare back was a landscape of blazing veins, fire burning beneath his skin, visible through the flesh like lava through cracks in cooling stone. Actual flames flickered at the edges of his shoulder blades. His eyes, when he lifted his head to look at her, were no longer amber. They glowed red, like embers in a dying fire. "Get out!" His voice was a snarl, barely human, warped by pain. "Go! I don't want you to see me like this." "I don't want you to." But Seraphina Vance didn't leave. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. This was not her world. These were not her battles. She was an administrative assistant from District 8 who ate instant noodles and filed reports. She was not supposed to be standing in a penthouse bedroom, facing a man who was literally on fire from the inside. But she had run too many times already. She crossed the room. She knelt behind him. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely control them. And then, without thinking, without planning, on pure instinct, she placed both palms against his back. The fire met her skin and dissolved. The blazing red veins shifted to pale orange, then gold, then extinguished entirely. The flames on his shoulder blades flickered and died. Damien's body, rigid with agony seconds before, sagged forward, his breathing slowing from ragged gasps to something approaching normal. "You..." He turned his head, eyes now amber again, wide with disbelief. "You didn't get burned." Seraphina Vance stared at her hands. The fire had touched her. She had felt its heat, the incredible intensity of it, and then it had vanished. Like water soaking into sand. Like darkness meeting dawn. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I told you." Damien sat up, still trembling, his voice hoarse. "You're the fated one. You absorb my fire. It's what the Phoenix bloodline does. You don't attack darkness. You transform it." "Nai. Wonder." They sat there in the silence, beneath the moonlight that was now flooding freely through the windows. The strange darkness that had been swallowing the light was gone. Seraphina Vance didn't know what to say. She had just witnessed something that defied every law of physics and biology she had ever learned. And yet somehow, impossibly, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Why does it hurt you so badly?" she asked finally. "The curse. What did it come from?" Damien took a shuddering breath. 1,000 years ago, the first HEC Long Viet, the Obsidian Dragon King, was destroyed by the first HAA Long Viet Ejandel. But before he fell, he cast a final curse. The Draconis curse. It passes through the HEA long bloodline. When one generation dies, the curse transfers to the next. It has killed every HAA long V for 1,000 years. And there's no way to break it except the bond. None that we've ever found. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not pain. Not hope. Something quieter. Gratitude. "You came," he said. "I didn't think you would." Neither did I. They sat together in the darkness, as the moon slowly crossed the sky outside the window. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved. Seraphina Vance kept her hand on his back, not because she had to, but because she didn't want to let go. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she believed in destiny or fate or ancient dragon bloodlines. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. No one deserved to suffer alone. Not even a man who was half dragon. Not even a man who had been searching for her for 3 years. Not even a man she was starting to care about more than she wanted to admit. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Seraphina Vance's life. She still went to work every morning. Still made coffee, though Damien had started making it for her instead, which earned her bewildered stares from every secretary on the floor. Still organized meetings and filed reports and answered emails. To the outside world, nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The warmth in her chest never fully went away now. It was subtle, a low ember rather than a flame, but it was always there, pulsing gently in time with her heartbeat. The birthmark on her wrist tingled whenever Damien was near. And when he wasn't, when he left for meetings, or worked late, she felt a strange emptiness, like a room where the fire had gone out. She started researching. Late at night, in her tiny studio apartment, she dove into every source she could find. Ancient mythology. Obscure academic papers on bloodline genetics. Message boards dedicated to people who claimed to be not entirely human. Most of it was nonsense. But buried in the nonsense were fragments of truth, references to the phoenix, to fire that could absorb other fire, to bloodlines that had been dormant for centuries. She experimented. Alone in her apartment, she focused on the birthmark and tried to summon something, anything. For the first week, nothing happened. She felt foolish, a grown woman staring at her own wrist, trying to will fire into existence. Then, on the 10th night, a spark appeared. It was tiny, barely the size of a pinhead. Pale blue, the color of a gas flame. It flickered for less than a second and died. But it was real. She had seen it. She had created it. Seraphina Vance sat on her bed, staring at her wrist, and felt the world shift beneath her feet. Everything Damien had told her, the curse, the dragon blood, the bond system, was true. And that meant she had to decide what to do about it. She went to Damien the next morning with a list of questions. He answered every one of them. Yes, the Phoenix bloodline often skipped generations. Yes, it was possible her mother had carried it without knowing. No, he didn't know why it was awakening now. Perhaps the proximity to a HAA long VE had triggered something dormant. Yes, there were others like them. Dragon shifters living hidden among humans, controlling corporations and governments from the shadows. Yes, some of them wanted her dead. That's what I'm most afraid of, Seraphina Vance admitted. Not the fire. Not the curse. The fact that there are people, creatures, out there who would kill me just for existing. Nilmir. What are you doing? They would kill you because you're the only one who can save me, Damien corrected quietly. Not because of who you are. Because of what you represent. A HAA long VND, with a completed bond, is the most powerful being in existence. The other clans have spent centuries making sure no HAA long VDN ever achieves it. Then what do? We prepare. Damien stood and offered her his hand. Come with me. There's something I need to show you. He led her to a private elevator at the back of the office, one she had never noticed, hidden behind a panel of frosted glass. It required a retinal scan and a 10-digit code to operate. The elevator descended for what felt like an eternity, far past the parking garage, far past any floor she knew existed. When the doors opened, Seraphina Vance stepped into a world she had never imagined. The underground facility was massive. A cavern carved into the bedrock beneath dragon holdings, lit by strange crystals that glowed with an inner amber light. The walls were lined with ancient weapons, suits of armor, tapestries depicting battles between creatures she couldn't name. At the center of the cavern was an open training floor, its surface scarred and scorched by what looked like centuries of use. This is where I trained, Damien said. After my father died. After I inherited the curse. This is where I learned to control the dragon. Line, there. Can you teach me? He turned to look at her. It won't be easy. The Phoenix bloodline has been dormant in you for 25 years. Waking it will take time. And patience. And there will be days when you want to give up. Well, dear, Anne. I've spent 3 years not giving up. Seraphina Vance met his eyes. I think I can handle a few more. They began training the next day. And it was, as Damien had warned, brutally difficult. Week 1. She couldn't summon a spark under pressure. Every time she tried to focus her energy with him standing nearby, the fire died, as if her body instinctively prioritized absorbing his fire over creating her own. Your nature is protection, not attack, Damien observed. You'll have to work with that, not against it. Week 2, tiny sparks appeared, the size of a fingertip, but only when she thought about her mother. The woman who had died when she was 12. The only person who had ever loved her unconditionally. Your fire comes from love, Damien said quietly. Not anger, not power, love. That's why you can transform mine. Because my fire comes from pain, and yours comes from connection. Week 3, she could form a small fireball, but it was unstable. Every time she tried to aim it at a target, it scattered into harmless sparks. I can't fight, she cried out in frustration, tears pricking at her eyes. Every time I try to attack, the fire refuses. Because you're not a warrior. Damien stepped closer and gently took her hand. You're a protector. The Phoenix bloodline has never produced conquerors. It produces shields. No, what? I don't want to be a shield. I want to be useful. Wow. You are the most useful person I have ever met. He looked directly into her eyes, and the intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. You are the only thing that has kept me sane through 13 years of this. Never. Not once. Think of yourself as useless. You cast a hall. Case. Week 4, Seraphina Vance made a breakthrough. She discovered she didn't need to attack. She could create a shield, a wall of blue fire that darkness could not penetrate. And when she stood between Damien and a threat, her fire was stronger than it had ever been. You're my sword, she realized, standing in the center of the training floor with blue flames flickering around her like a living cloak. And I'm your shield. Together, Damien said. And for the first time since she'd known him, perhaps for the first time in his entire life, he smiled. A real smile. It transformed his face entirely, softening the hard edges, making him look younger than his 28 years. Seraphina Vance felt her heart skip a beat. And she knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that she was in much deeper than she had ever planned to be. The second full moon since their reunion. Seraphina Vance arrived at the penthouse just after sunset. This time she wasn't trembling. This time she knew what was coming, and she had made her choice. The living room was lit by candles. Dozens of them, arranged on every surface, their warm glow replacing the harsh city lights that Damien had dimmed to nothing. Silas had prepared everything, fresh flowers, a light meal, even music playing softly from hidden speakers, and then quietly withdrawn to give them privacy. Damien stood by the window, his back to her, staring at the moon that was just beginning to rise above the skyline. His shirt was already unbuttoned. The dragon veins on his chest were starting to glow, not the fiery red of agony yet, but the first warning embers of what was to come. You came, he said without turning around. I told you I would. Seraphina Vance set her bag down and crossed the room to stand beside him. How bad is it tonight? Manageable. For now. He turned to face her, and she saw the strain in his eyes, the effort it was taking to hold the fire at bay. You don't have to do this. The second bond, it's different from the first. It requires both of us to accept it. Consciously. Completely. There's no going back after this. I know. If we complete the second bond, every dragon shifter will know our location. The Obsidian clan will come for us. I know. And you're still here? Seraphina Vance reached up and placed her palm against his cheek. The birthmark on her wrist flared. Not with pain, but with warmth. Recognition. I've spent 25 years being afraid. Afraid of my father. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being not good enough. I'm tired of being afraid. Miri. She took his hand, the same hand that had trembled 3 years ago in a hotel bar, and pressed it to her chest, over her heart. I don't understand everything about this. I don't know what I am, or what I'm supposed to be. But I know one thing. She looked up into his amber eyes. When I'm with you, I'm not afraid anymore. Damien's composure cracked. The careful control he had built over 13 years of isolation shattered like glass. He pulled her into his arms, not gently, not carefully, but desperately, and buried his face in her hair. "I've been alone my entire life," he whispered. "Even before the curse. Even before my father died. I was the heir. The next HIA long VN. No one ever treated me like a person, only like a weapon in training." His arms tightened around her. "Until you. You called me a bartender and asked me to pour you a drink. You had no idea who I was, and you treated me like I mattered. Nan. You do matter." He kissed her. The moment their lips met, the fire ignited. But this time it was different. Not the desperate, temporary suppression of the first bond. This was transformation. Orange fire erupted from Damien's chest, but instead of burning, it shifted. Orange deepened to gold. Gold bled into violet. A color of fire that had never existed before, the signature of the second bond. Their clothes burned away in a heartbeat. Seraphina Vance gasped. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming sensation of power flooding through her body. The phoenix fire inside her was awakening fully, responding to the dragon fire, merging with it, transforming it. Every cell in her body felt like it was singing. Damien lifted her and carried her to the bedroom. The fire followed them, a violet cocoon that surrounded them both, insulating them from the world outside. When they came together, it wasn't two bodies joining. It was two fires merging into one. Seraphina Vance had never felt anything like it. She could feel everything, not just his body, but his soul. 13 years of agony. The loneliness of being the last of his bloodline. The terror of dying alone, like his father before him. And beneath all of it, buried so deep even he had forgotten it was there. Hope. The hope that someone, someday, would see past the dragon and love the man. "I see you," she whispered against his lips. "All of you. And I'm not going anywhere. Nor. Gimme dying." When dawn broke, they lay tangled together in the rumpled sheets. The violet fire now faded to a soft glow around their joined hands. Damien looked down at his chest. The dragon veins were no longer red. They had shifted to pale violet, the color of power rather than agony. The curse had weakened enormously. The full moon pain that had once been hell itself was now no more than a mild fever. But it hadn't vanished entirely. The second bond only weakened the curse, 60, maybe 70%. And somewhere deep in the city, in the shadows beneath the skyscrapers, a response was already forming. The energy signal from the second bond had been broadcast like a beacon. Every dragon shifter within hundreds of miles now knew the HEA long V each, and bound his faded one, and that their location was the penthouse at the top of Dragon Holdings. Far below the city, in a chamber carved from obsidian, and lit only by the faint glow of ancient runes, the HEC long Vishin opened his eyes. They were black, entirely black, no white, no iris, and they burned with a hatred 800 years old. "Second bond," he hissed, the sound like stone scraping stone. "Faster than I anticipated." The faded one must have accepted him willingly. "Dyrnskantara." He rose from his throne of shadow and moved toward a bank of monitors. On the largest screen, a message from a contact labeled, simply M, energy surge confirmed. Penthouse. "Will proceed with the gala plan. You know. Only. The HEC, long VC, Aang's lipless mouth stretched into something that was not quite a smile. "Good. The gala will be the perfect stage. Let them celebrate their love. It will make their fall all the sweeter." Nimnyaran. In the darkness behind him, shapes began to move. Shadows within shadows. The obsidian army was stirring. And in her modest apartment across the city, Victoria Crane stared at the message on her phone and felt the bruise-like marks on her arms pulse with fresh pain. She was running out of time. The disease was accelerating. If she didn't deliver Seraphina Vance to Obsidian within the month, the promise of a cure would be withdrawn. She looked at her reflection in the dark screen. A woman dying by inches. A woman who had been promised salvation in exchange for betrayal. "Sorry, Seraphina," she whispered, "but everyone fights for themselves in the end." The morning after the second bond, Seraphina Vance woke to find Damien already awake, propped on one elbow watching her. The violet veins on his chest were still visible, faint now, like old scars, but the expression on his face was one she had never seen before. Peace. It looked almost foreign on him, as if his face had forgotten how to arrange itself into anything but tension. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm memorizing this," he said, "in case it never happens again." "It will." She sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "But first, you have to teach me how to fight. Actually, fight. Not just create sparks and shields. If what you said about the energy signal is true, then we're on borrowed time." Name. Damien's expression sobered. "You're right. But I need you to understand something. The Phoenix Fire works differently from Dragon Fire. I've spent my whole life learning to destroy. You have to learn to protect. What you showed me during training, that shield you created, that's your true nature. Don't fight it. Long. You see to you how. I'm not going to stand behind you while you battle monsters alone. I know." He reached for her hand. "That's what terrifies me." They trained every day for the next 4 weeks in the underground facility beneath Dragon Holdings. And it was harder than anything Seraphina Vance had ever done. Harder than starting over with nothing. Harder than enduring Victoria Crane's abuse. Harder than walking away from her family's fortune. Damien pushed her relentlessly. Physical conditioning first. Her body needed to be stronger, faster, more resilient. Then control exercises, learning to summon the blue fire at will instead of by accident. Then combat simulations, where she had to maintain her shield while dodging attacks, while running, while exhausted, while afraid. She failed more times than she succeeded. But she never gave up. The breakthrough came in the 3rd week. They were sparring in the main chamber. Damien in his human form, but channeling enough dragon fire to fill the room with oppressive heat. Seraphina Vance was on her back foot, shield flickering, arms trembling with exhaustion. Every instinct told her to run, to surrender, to admit she wasn't strong enough. But then she thought about her father, the man who had called her worthless, about her ex-fiancé, who had traded 12 years for an intern, about 3 years of instant noodles and tiny apartments, and people telling her she would never amount to anything. And something inside her snapped. Not in defeat. In defiance. The blue fire erupted from her palms, not as a shield this time, but as a wave. A wall of pure phoenix energy that swept across the training floor and slammed Damien against the far wall. He hit the stone hard enough to crack it, slid to the ground and lay there for a moment, stunned. Seraphina Vance stared at her hands. The fire was still burning, blue-white, impossibly bright, and completely under her control. "Did I hurt you?" Her voice came out small, horrified. Damien picked himself up, dusted off his shirt, and walked toward her. There was a cut on his cheek, a thin line of blood, but his eyes were shining. "That was incredible. You didn't just block my fire. You redirected it. You used my own energy against me." "No, sir. I don't even know how I did it. Your power comes from emotion, from love, from the need to protect." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the pulse beating in his throat. "But it also comes from everything you've survived. Every time someone told you that you weren't enough, you proved them wrong. That's not weakness, Seraphina. That's the foundation of the strongest shield in the world." Ngambai. She looked at him, at the cut on his cheek, at the violet veins on his chest, at the amber eyes that had once seemed cold, but now held nothing but warmth, and she realized something she had been avoiding for weeks. She loved him. Not because he was a dragon king. Not because he was rich or powerful or destined to be hers. Because he saw her, really saw her, in a way no one else ever had. Because he had searched for her for 3 years and never stopped hoping. Because when she was afraid, he didn't try to fix it. He just stayed beside her, steady as stone. I don't know if I'm strong enough for what's coming, she admitted. You are. He took her face in his hands, calloused palms gentle against her cheeks. You've been strong your whole life. You just never had a reason to believe it. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender, so unlike the cold CEO the world knew, that it brought tears to her eyes. We'll face it together, he said. Sword and shield. Fire and fire. Yes. Together, she echoed. And believed it. That night, they sat on the penthouse balcony overlooking the city, a blanket wrapped around both of them against the autumn chill. The moon was waning now, a sliver of silver in the dark sky, but the warmth between them was enough to hold back the cold. Tell me about your father, Seraphina Vance said quietly. Damien was silent for a long moment. He was the sixth generation India, strongest of his line. He held the curse at bay for 30 years, longer than anyone before him. Everyone thought he might be the one to finally break it. His voice dropped. He burned to death in front of me when I was 15. The curse doesn't just kill you. It consumes you from within. I watched my father scream for 3 days before the fire finally took him. And then it passed to you. The moment he died, I felt it. Like someone had poured molten metal into my veins. I collapsed in the middle of his funeral. When I woke up, Silas was there. He told me what had happened. What I was now. Anyway. Seraphina Vance tightened her arm around his waist. That's why you were at the bar that night. The night we met. I had given up. His voice was barely audible. 10 years of burning. 10 years of knowing I would die exactly the way my father did. I went to that bar to drink myself numb before the full moon hit. And then you stumbled in. Drunk and furious. And absolutely beautiful. And you looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster. Not a weapon. Just a man. Damien. And when you touched my hand, when the fire went out for the first time in 10 years, I knew. I knew you were the answer. Not because of some ancient prophecy. Because for the first time since my father died, I wanted to live. He turned to look at her, and the naked vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. You didn't just save my life that night. You gave me a reason to fight for it. Seraphina Vance kissed him then, not the desperate, fiery kiss of the second bond, but something gentler. A promise. A commitment. She didn't say the words out loud, not yet, but her heart knew them. And judging by the way Damien held her afterward, so did his. The 5th anniversary gala of Dragon Holdings was held at the Grand Celestial Hotel, a 5-star monument to wealth and power in the heart of Asheville City. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Champagne fountains sparkled on every table. The city's elite had turned out in force, draped in silk and diamonds, eager to rub shoulders with the famously reclusive CEO. Seraphina Vance stood at the entrance to the ballroom in a gown of deep midnight blue, the first elegant thing she had worn in 3 years. The fabric flowed like water over her frame, pooling at her heels. Her hair was swept up in a sophisticated twist, a few loose strands framing her face. On her left wrist, the feather-shaped birthmark was hidden beneath a silver bracelet, but it pulsed with warmth, a steady reminder of what she was and who she was here with. Damien waited at the foot of the grand staircase. He wore a black tuxedo, perfectly tailored, his dark hair swept back from his face. The violet veins on his chest were invisible beneath the crisp white shirt, but she knew they were there. She knew every inch of him by now. When he saw her descending the stairs, he froze. His composure, that legendary ice-cold mask the entire business world feared, shattered like thin glass. His lips parted. His eyes widened. For a single, unguarded moment, he looked like a man who had just seen something he didn't believe was real. "You're beautiful," he said, and his voice was so raw, so stripped of pretense, that Seraphina Vance felt her cheeks flush. "You're not so bad yourself." He offered his arm. She took it. And together, they walked into a ballroom full of people who had never seen the CEO of Dragon Holdings smile until tonight. The whispers started the moment they entered. The coldest man in the city was smiling. His hand rested at the small of a woman's back, not possessively, but protectively. And the woman was nobody. A former administrative assistant from a branch office. A nameless girl in a borrowed dress. Who was she? How had she caught the dragon? Seraphina Vance heard the whispers and refused to let them touch her. She had been judged her entire life. By her father, by her fiancé, by every socialite who had ever looked down on her. She was done letting other people's opinions matter. They danced. The orchestra played a waltz, and Damien led her across the floor with surprising grace. 300 years of etiquette training, he murmured in her ear. The dragon bloodline takes its traditions seriously. 300 years of training and you still can't make your own coffee. He laughed, actually laughed, a low surprised sound that drew stares from every corner of the room. You're determined to humble me, aren't you? Someone has to keep the HAL Long VN's ego in check. They danced through 3 songs, and the world outside the ballroom seemed to fade away. There was only the music, and the warmth of his hand on her waist, and the impossible reality that she, Seraphina Vance, the disowned heiress, the girl from District 8, was dancing with a dragon king. But in the shadows at the edge of the ballroom, Victoria Crane was not dancing. She stood alone near the service entrance, a champagne glass untouched in her hand, her eyes fixed on the couple at the center of the floor. The bruise-like marks on her arms had spread further, creeping past her wrists now, despite the heavy foundation she had applied. The disease was accelerating. She had weeks left. Maybe days. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unsaved number. The Obsidian team is in position. Parking garage, level B2. 11:00 p.m. Do not fail us. Yan. Entry. Kibishis, Idihasham. Victoria Crane's grip tightened on the champagne glass until her knuckles went white. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Doubt. Remorse. The ghost of the woman she had been before fear and jealousy had eaten her alive. But then she looked at Seraphina Vance, glowing, radiant, wrapped in the arms of a man worth billions, and the doubt died. Why did she get everything? Why did an ordinary administrative assistant, a woman with no family and no power and no future, get to be the fated one of Dragon King? While Victoria Crane, brilliant and ambitious and dying by inches, got nothing? It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. She raised the champagne glass to her lips, drained it in one swallow, and typed her reply. Understood. She'll be in the garage at 11:00. The orchestra began a new song. Damien spun Seraphina Vance in a slow circle, and she laughed, a genuine, carefree laugh that transformed her entire face. Victoria Crane watched them and felt something cold settle in her chest. She had made her choice. There was no going back now. At 10:45, Seraphina Vance excused herself from the dance floor. Damien was pulled aside by a group of investors, their faces flushed with champagne and ambition, eager to discuss expansion plans. She kissed his cheek, a gesture so casual, so natural, that neither of them thought twice about it, and told him she would meet him by the car. The elevator ride to the parking garage was uneventful. She checked her phone. Replied to a text from Miles. You looked amazing tonight. Everyone's talking about you, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, Seraphina Vance felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The elevator doors opened on level B2, and every instinct she had developed over 4 weeks of training screamed a warning. The garage was dark. Too dark. The fluorescent lights overhead were flickering, not the random flicker of faulty wiring, but a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat made of shadows. The air was cold, wrong, charged with an energy that made the birthmark on her wrist flare hot. She turned to get back in the elevator, but the doors had already closed behind her, and the control panel was dead. Hello, Seraphina. Victoria Crane stepped out of the shadows. Her smile was the same poisonous smile Seraphina Vance had endured for months at the office. But her eyes were different. Desperate. The eyes of a woman with nothing left to lose. Victoria. What are you? Did you know I'm dying? Victoria Crane pulled back her sleeve, revealing the bruise-like marks in their full horror, black veins spreading like cracks across her entire forearm. Obsidian poison. My own body is eating itself. They promised me a cure. HAC long blood. All I had to do was deliver you. Kneeing, mile, escarta. Nice cell. Victoria, listen to me. Whatever they promised you, it's a lie. The Obsidian clan doesn't cure people, they use them. You're just a tool to them. No? Die. Maybe. Victoria Crane's smile didn't waver. But at least I'm not the tool who fell in love with a monster. She raised her hand, and the shadows came alive. 5 figures emerged from the darkness. Not human. Their forms were indistinct, shifting, as if they were made of smoke and malice, rather than flesh and bone. Obsidian soldiers. The HCC Long VCAng's personal guard. Seraphina Vance didn't hesitate. 4 weeks of training became instinct. A wall of blue fire erupted from her palms, slamming into the first 2 soldiers and sending them crashing into the concrete pillars. The fire illuminated the entire garage for a single blinding moment, and in that light, she saw there were more of them. Not 5. 10. A full squad. She tried to form an attack. A fireball, like the ones she'd practiced. But the old weakness was still there. Her fire refused to strike with deadly intent. It sputtered and died before reaching its target. 3 soldiers closed in from the sides. She pivoted, trying to raise her shield again, but there were too many of them. Too fast. A cold hand clamped around her wrist, and the phoenix fire died instantly. The darkness was stronger than she had anticipated. Much stronger. Damien, she gasped. Not a cry for help but a warning. But he was 50 floors above her, surrounded by investors, and he couldn't hear her. A chloroform-soaked cloth pressed over her mouth. The world swam. The last thing she saw was Victoria Crane's face. Pale, triumphant, and beneath the triumph, something that looked almost like regret. Then the darkness swallowed everything. But in the moment before consciousness fled completely, Seraphina Vance did one last thing. She didn't attack. She didn't fight. She channeled every remaining drop of Phoenix energy into a single burst, and shot it straight up through the concrete ceiling of the parking garage. Through the lobby. Through the ballroom. Up into the night sky, where it exploded in a blaze of blue fire visible for miles. A signal. A beacon. A desperate cry for help from a woman who refused to die quietly. In the ballroom, Damien was mid-handshake with an investor when his head snapped toward the window. He saw the blue fire blossom in the sky, and his blood turned to ice. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He ran. Through the ballroom. Through the lobby. Through the emergency stairwell. And when he burst out onto the hotel roof, the dragon inside him tore free. His wings, vast and blazing violet, ripped through his tuxedo jacket. His eyes flared from amber to crimson, and in the heart of Ashevale City, in full view of anyone who happened to look up, Damien Drake transformed into the HAA Long V-ished and launched himself into the night sky. Nothing. Not reputation. Not secrecy. Not the 1,000-year code of silence that governed the dragon shifter world mattered anymore. Seraphina Vance was in danger. And Damien would burn the entire city to the ground before he let anyone hurt her. Consciousness returned in fragments. Cold stone against her back. The taste of iron in her mouth. A pounding headache that made the world pulse at the edges. Seraphina Vance forced her eyes open and found herself in a chamber carved from black rock, lit only by the faint amber glow of runes etched into the walls. The air smelled of damp earth, and something worse. Something organic, decaying. She was bound to a stone pillar, thick ropes around her wrists and ankles. Her gown was torn, one heel missing, her carefully styled hair now a tangled mess. But she was alive. And as long as she was alive, she could fight. Awake, at last. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the stone itself. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, gaunt, draped in robes the color of dried blood. His face was pale as bone, and his eyes were black. Not dark brown. Not deep blue. Black. Black. Pupil, iris, and sclera, all of it swallowed by an emptiness that seemed to drink the light from the room. The HAC Long, VC. 800 years old. The ancient enemy of the HIA Long bloodline. And he was smiling. The phoenix. He circled her slowly, like a predator savoring the moment before the kill. Do you know how long I have waited for one of your blood to appear? 500 years. 5 centuries of watching the HAA Long bloodline weaken generation by generation, and never once did a fated one emerge. I had begun to think the phoenixes had finally died out. Sorry to disappoint you. Seraphina Vance's voice was hoarse but steady. I'm not dying today. The HEC Long VN laughed, a dry, rattling sound like dead leaves scraping across stone. Such fire. I can see why the HAA Long VN is drawn to you. But fire can be extinguished. And when you are dead, the last hope of breaking the Draconis curse dies with you. I am. You're afraid of him. The words came out before she could stop them. All of this, 800 years of planning, the trap at the gala, the mole in his own company, all because you're afraid of what he'll become if the bond is completed. The HAC Long VCN smile vanished. For a single, terrifying moment, the mask slipped, and beneath it was something ancient and hateful, and consumed by an obsession that had outlived empires. You know nothing of what I am afraid of. I watched the first HEA all long beyond. Destroy my master 1,000 years ago. I have waited 8 centuries for the bloodline to weaken enough that I could finally destroy them. And now, when victory is within my grasp, you appear. You appear. A dormant phoenix. A fated one who doesn't even know her own power. He leaned close, his breath cold against her face. You are an anomaly. An accident of genetics. And I will not allow an accident to undo 800 years of preparation. Seraphina Vance met his black eyes without flinching. You talk too much. The HHCC Long VCN's hand closed around her throat. Not hard enough to choke, just enough to remind her how fragile she was. Your defiance is admirable, but it will not save you. The HAA Long V, in, is coming. I can feel him drawing closer. And when he arrives, he will find your body at my feet. Then he will be consumed by grief, and his fire will burn uncontrolled, and the curse will finish what it started 13 years ago. He released her and stepped back. Let him come. Let him see. The second bond has made him stronger, but without the third bond, he is still mortal. Still vulnerable. Still capable of being broken. He raised his hand, and a blade of pure shadow materialized in his palm, a weapon that seemed to drink the light from the runes on the walls. Any last words, Phoenix? Seraphina Vance closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, the woman who had died when she was 12, the only person who had ever loved her unconditionally. She thought about her father, the man who had called her worthless, who had disowned her in front of 200 guests. She thought about 3 years of survival, of instant noodles and tiny apartments, and never giving up no matter how hard it got. And she thought about Damien, the man who had searched for her for 3 years. The man who smiled for the first time in his life because of her. The man who was currently tearing through the night sky on wings of fire, coming for her. I've spent my whole life being told I'm not enough, she said, opening her eyes. But I'm still here. And I'm not going anywhere. Yawn. The HEC long VC and raised the shadow blade. And the ceiling exploded. A roar shook the entire compound, a sound that was not human, not animal, not anything the world had heard in 1,000 years. 15 meters of blazing violet dragon crashed through the stone ceiling, wings spread wide enough to fill the entire chamber, amber eyes burning with a fury that made the very air tremble. Release her. Damien's voice, amplified by the dragon, was a force of nature. The runes on the walls flickered and died. The obsidian soldiers who had been standing guard scattered like leaves before a hurricane. The HEC long VCing turned, the shadow blade still in his hand, and smiled. Finally. The main event. Nohana. Nine He snapped his fingers. From every shadow in the chamber, soldiers emerged, dozens of them, their forms solidifying from smoke into flesh. Chains of darkness shot up from the floor, coiling around Damien's legs, dragging him down. These were not ordinary attacks. They were forged from the HACC long VHA's own essence. Ordinary fire couldn't sever them. Damien roared and thrashed, his violet flames searing through the first wave of chains. But for every chain he destroyed, 2 more took its place. The HEC long VCN had been preparing for this battle for centuries. Every tactic, every countermeasure, he had anticipated it all. Did you think I had only one base? The HEC, Long Vion's voice was conversational, almost amused. I've lived 800 years. I have contingencies, within contingencies. This facility is designed specifically to neutralize a HNA, Long VENH high. The shadow chains feed on your fire. The more you struggle, the stronger they become. Almarin, I. Damien was dragged to his knees, his dragon form flickering as the chains tightened. Violet fire erupted from his body, but the chains absorbed it, grew thicker, pulled harder. He fought like a creature possessed, but physics and ancient magic were against him. Your father fought the same way, the HAC Long VEUM said, walking toward the trapped dragon. The 6th generation, HAA, Long V. Strong man. The strongest I've ever seen. He held out for 3 days before the curse consumed him. I watched every moment of it. Yeah, am I? Appealing in Clarsenty. Damien's roar of grief and fury shook the walls. But the chains held. And now I will watch his son die the same way. But first, I want you to see this. He raised the shadow blade over Seraphina Vance. And the world went very, very still. Seraphina Vance looked at Damien. The dragon. The man, the king who had searched for her for 3 years, and saw something in his eyes that broke her heart. Not fear. Not rage. Grief. The same grief he had carried since he was 15, watching his father burn. The grief of losing everyone he had ever loved. She refused to be another loss. She had endured too much, survived too much, to die tied to a pillar in an underground chamber. The ropes on her wrists began to glow. Not with attacking fire, she had learned by now that attack was not her nature. But she had also learned something else. Phoenix fire didn't have to destroy. It could transform. It could absorb. The obsidian chains on Damien were feeding on his fire. But what if they were fed something they couldn't digest? What if they were fed darkness transformed into light? Seraphina Vance closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, past the fear, past the pain, past every voice that had ever told her she wasn't enough. She found the spark that had kindled the first time Damien touched her hand in a bar 3 years ago. She found the fire that had grown through weeks of training and nights of love. She found the core of the phoenix, not a weapon, but a promise. A promise that darkness could be transformed, that pain could become power. That love was stronger than any curse. The ropes dissolved. Not burned, dissolved. The darkness within them converted into pure blue light. And around Seraphina Vance, a ring of phoenix fire erupted, not to attack, but to protect. A shield so bright it made the HEC Long V'ing recoil, his shadow blade dissolving in the radiance. "Impossible," he hissed. "The phoenix bloodline hasn't fully awakened. You shouldn't be able to. I'm full of surprises." Seraphina Vance rose to her feet, her brown eyes now glowing a brilliant blue. She stepped between the HEC Long V'ing and Damien. The shield, exactly as she had trained to be. "And I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to protect him." The blue fire around her intensified. And somewhere in the darkness, Damien felt the shadow chains loosen, just slightly. Just enough. 2 flames, red, violet, and brilliant blue, erupted simultaneously. The shadow chains holding Damien shattered as Seraphina Vance's phoenix fire swept through them. Not destroying them, transforming them. Darkness became light. Chains became ash. And Damien rose, his dragon form blazing with renewed fury, his wounds already beginning to heal. They stood together, the dragon and the phoenix, the sword and the shield, facing the HEC Long V'ing and his army of shadows. "No more running," Seraphina Vance said. "No more hiding," Damien answered. They moved as one. Damien transformed fully, his dragon form now streaked with violet and blue, the colors of their combined power. Seraphina Vance leaped onto his head, her bare feet finding purchase between his scales, her arms spread wide as she channeled the phoenix fire in a protective dome around them both. The battle that followed was unlike anything the world had seen in 1,000 years. Obsidian soldiers attacked in waves, shadows given form, creatures of darkness and malice. But they could not penetrate Seraphina Vance's shield, and those that tried were incinerated by the combined fire of the HAA Long, a flame that was no longer red, no longer violet, but something entirely new. THA. The deep purple fire of absolute union. The HEC Long V'ing screamed in fury and launched himself at them, his human form dissolving into a monstrous black dragon, easily twice Damien's size, wings that blotted out what little light remained in the chamber. He had been saving this form for 800 years, waiting for the moment when he would finally have to use it. Fire and darkness collided. The compound shook. Walls crumbled. The very earth seemed to groan under the weight of the power being unleashed. But Seraphina Vance and Damien, they were no longer 2 separate beings. The third bond had begun. Not completed. That would require them to strike the final blow together. But igniting. The energy flowing between them was unlike anything either had experienced. She could feel his thoughts. He could feel her heartbeat. Every move he made, she anticipated. Every threat she sensed, he intercepted. They were one. The HEC, Long V'ing, was stronger than Damien alone, centuries older, more experienced, his power honed over 800 years of darkness. But he had never faced a bonded pair. He had never faced the third bond. "I have watched 5 generations of your bloodline die," he roared, his black fire crashing against Seraphina Vance's shield. "I will watch the 6th die tonight. My father died alone." Damien's voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "But I am not my father." He looked at Seraphina Vance. She looked at him. And in that glance, an entire conversation passed between them. Together. Always. The final blow was not a single attack. It was a convergence. Damien unleashed the TIHIA from his maw, a storm of purple fire that would have been devastating on its own. But Seraphina Vance didn't just shield him, she amplified him. Her phoenix fire wrapped around his dragon fire, feeding it, focusing it, turning a storm into a lance of pure annihilation. It struck the HEC long VON, square in the chest. The ancient dragon screamed, a sound that was half fury and half disbelief, as the fire tore through him. His black scales cracked. His shadow body began to dissolve. For the first time in 800 years, the HEC long VEN felt something he had almost forgotten. The cold touch of mortality. "This is not the end," he howled, his form collapsing into ash and shadow. "I have prepared for this. My HEC Tam, my heart of darkness, still exists. I will regenerate. I will return. Do better next time," Seraphina Vance said. The compound collapsed around them. Damien wrapped his wings around Seraphina Vance and launched upward, crashing through layer after layer of stone and earth, until they burst into the open sky. Below them, the obsidian stronghold crumbled into rubble, centuries of darkness reduced to dust. They flew through the night, the city spread out beneath them like a carpet of stars. Seraphina Vance lay against Damien's dragon neck, her body trembling with exhaustion, her phoenix fire reduced to a faint blue glow around her hands. The third bond had been ignited, but not completed. She could feel it. The connection was there, stronger than ever, but the curse wasn't fully broken yet. Not until they found the HEC Tam and destroyed it. But that was a battle for another day. Right now they were alive. They had won. Then she noticed something. The black veins on Damien's left wing, where the HEC long VEN had driven a shadow blade in the final moments before his dissolution. They were spreading. Slowly. Insidiously. The HEC long VM's final gift. A remnant of darkness that would drain Damien's power year by year until nothing remained. "The final curse," Damien said, his voice strained. "He couldn't kill us, so he cursed me instead. What will it do? Drain my fire. Slowly. It could take years. Decades even. But if we don't find the HEC Tam and destroy it..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Then we'll find it." Seraphina Vance pressed her palm to his scales, and the blue fire flared in response, pushing back against the darkness, holding it at bay. Silas said he found clues. The old city beneath Ashvale. "We'll go there together." 9. Seraphina. No arguments. Her voice was fierce despite her exhaustion. "You spent 3 years searching for me. I'm not letting you fight alone. Not ever again. You may on the sile." Damien was silent for a long moment. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, "I love you." The words hung in the cold night air. 3 simple words that a dragon king had never said to anyone, not in 1,000 years of HAA long bloodline history. Because HA long VENs didn't love. They conquered. They protected. They fought, and they died. And they passed the curse to the next generation. But Damien Drake was not his ancestors. And Seraphina Vance was not an ordinary woman. "I know," she said, and pressed a kiss to his scales. "I love you too." They flew toward the dawn, the first light of morning painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Behind them, smoke rose from the ruins of the obsidian stronghold. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, the HEC Tam, the Theon Long clan, the black veins spreading across Damien's wing. Ahead of them lay a war that was far from over, but they were together. And that, against all odds, against 800 years of hatred, against a curse that had killed every HAA long VEN for 1,000 years, that was enough. The battle was not over. Damien and Seraphina Vance burst through the collapsing ceiling of the obsidian stronghold. But the HEC long VEN's forces had not been fully routed. Even as the compound crumbled, shadow soldiers poured from hidden tunnels, climbing the walls like living darkness, their eyeless faces turned toward the sky. And in the center of the destruction, the HEC long VEN himself had not yet fallen. His black dragon form was broken, scales shattered, wings torn, his body dissolving at the edges, but he was still fighting. 800 years of hatred would not be extinguished so easily. You think you've won? His voice was a shriek, half dragon and half madness. I have lived through the fall of empires. I have watched every long Vivian before you die in agony. You are nothing but children playing with fire you don't understand. We understand enough. Seraphina Vance's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. The blue fire around her hands had dimmed to a flicker, but it was still burning. We understand that darkness can be transformed. We understand that love is stronger than hate. And we understand that you've been running from your own fear for 800 years. Worrell. My fear? The long VCN's laugh was a rasping, dying sound. What could I possibly fear? The truth. Seraphina Vance stepped forward, her bare feet finding purchase on the rubble. You're not avenging your master. You're not reclaiming a stolen throne. You're terrified. Terrified that the long bloodline will produce a king who is stronger than your entire clan combined. Terrified that the curse will finally be broken. Terrified that after 800 years you'll be forgotten. The long Vang's black eyes widened, and in that moment of hesitation, Damien struck. The TIA, the purple fire of the third bond, erupted from his maw in a concentrated beam. Seraphina Vance's phoenix fire wrapped around it, not dampening it, but focusing it, turning a storm into a spear. The combined attack pierced through the long Veng's chest, through the darkness that was his heart, through the very core of the hatred that had sustained him for 8 centuries. For the first time in 800 years, the long Veng screamed in genuine terror. No, I cannot. I am eternal. I have prepared. But even as his body dissolved into black ash, even as the obsidian soldiers scattered into dying shadows, his voice echoed across the ruined compound one final time. Not a scream. A whisper. A promise, spoken on the wind itself. Do you think this is the end? My Tam still exists, hidden where no fire can reach. I will regenerate. I will return. And when I do, I will make you watch everything you love burn. Oh, no. The last echo faded. The compound fell silent. The battle was over. Damien collapsed, his dragon form shrinking back to human as the last of his strength drained away. Seraphina Vance caught him before he hit the rubble, her arms barely strong enough to hold his weight, but she held him anyway. We won, she whispered. We actually won. Not yet. Damien's voice was weak, but his eyes, amber now, no longer blazing, were fixed on the horizon. The Tam. As long as it exists, he can come back. And the Long clan, they've been watching. They'll want to meet now. To negotiate. Or to declare war. Then, let them come. Seraphina Vance pressed her lips to his forehead. We've faced worse. We'll face them too. Nah. From the east, the first light of dawn was breaking, painting the ruined compound in shades of rose and gold, turning the black ash of the obsidian soldiers into something that almost looked like fallen stars. They had won the battle. The war was far from over. But in this moment, in the quiet between the violence and the grief, they had each other. And that was enough to keep fighting. They returned to Dragon Holdings at dawn. The flight back was silent. Damien flew slowly, his damaged wings struggling to keep them aloft, and Seraphina Vance lay against his neck, with her eyes closed, counting his heartbeats through the scales. She was running on nothing but adrenaline and stubbornness. Later, she would collapse. Later, she would sleep for a week. But not yet. Not until they were safe. The helicopter landing pad on the rooftop was empty, which was strange. There should have been security. There should have been. Damien landed and shifted to human form. He stumbled, caught himself on the railing, and froze. Silas stood by the rooftop access door. He was not alone. The evidence of battle was everywhere. Scorch marks on the concrete. Shattered glass from the windows below. The bodies of at least a dozen obsidian soldiers, already dissolving into shadow, their forms unable to maintain cohesion in the morning light. And Silas, standing in the center of it all, holding a sword that glowed with the faint amber light of ancient runes. His clothes were torn. Blood streaked his face and chest. But he was standing, and when he saw Damien and Seraphina Vance land on the rooftop, he smiled. "Young master." His voice was steady. "I held them off. Silas, you're wounded." "It's nothing." Silas took a step toward them, and stumbled. He caught himself on the sword, driving its point into the concrete to stay upright. "Obsidian attacked the tower while you were gone. A secondary force. They wanted to destroy the symbol of the long bloodline. I bought time. Nimisen, and Limnan." Damien rushed forward, catching Silas before he could fall. And that was when he saw it. A deep wound in Silas's chest, hidden beneath his torn jacket, where a shadow blade had found its mark. The wound wasn't bleeding, because there was almost nothing left to bleed. "No. Damien's voice broke. No. Silas, stay with me." "Seraphina, the Phoenix Fire, can you heal him?" Seraphina Vance knelt beside them, her hands already glowing with blue light. She pressed her palms to the wound, channeling every spark of energy she had left. The fire responded, but it was like pouring water into sand. The wound was too deep. The damage was too extensive. The shadow blade had pierced his heart. "Too late, young master." Silas reached up and grasped Damien's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were clear. "I have served House Drake for 40 years. I served your father before you. I watched him burn, and I could not save him. That guilt has been my companion for 13 years. You have nothing to feel guilty for." Damien's voice was raw, scraped clean of every defense he had ever built. "You raised me. After my father died, you were the only one who... I watched a 15-year-old boy inherit a curse that should never have been his burden." Silas's voice was fading now, each word requiring more effort than the last. "I watched him grow up in agony. Alone. Convinced he was beyond saving. I watched him search for 3 years for a woman who had vanished without a trace." His eyes shifted to Seraphina Vance, and then I watched him find her. And I watched him smile for the first time in his life. "Nyan, and down." Seraphina Vance couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face, hot and silent. "The HAC Tam," Silas whispered. "I found it. Beneath the old city. Underneath Ashvale, beneath the foundations of the original settlement. The HAC Long VC hid it there 500 years ago, in a chamber that predates the city itself. You'll need to go deeper than the underground facility. Deeper than anything we've ever built. Naomin. We'll find it." Seraphina Vance's voice was steady despite the tears. "I promise." Silas looked at her, and his expression shifted into something that was almost wonder. "I know you will. You are the answer I prayed for. All those years. The one who would save the young master. Why? I'm easy. And I'm here." He turned back to Damien. "You were never a burden. You were never a monster. You were the best thing to ever happen to House Drake. Your father knew it. The night before he died, he told me. Silas, my son will be stronger than me. He will break the curse. He just needs someone to fight beside him." "Yanolhan, Kaya." Damien bent over Silas's hand and wept. Not the controlled grief of a CEO. Not the stoic acceptance of a warrior. The raw, broken sobs of a man who was losing his last connection to the boy he had once been. "Take care of him, Ms. Pel." "Seraphina." Silas's voice was barely a breath now. "He is strong, but more fragile than he lets on. He has spent his whole life being a weapon. Teach him to be a man." "Nyan." "I will." And the sword. Silas's fingers brushed the hilt of the ancient blade. It belonged to the first HIA Long Viet and She. It can cut through any darkness, even the HAC Tam. Take it. Use it. End this curse forever. Nina. Anai. His hand went limp. The sun had fully risen over Ashvale City now, painting the rooftop in shades of gold and amber. On the helipad, two figures knelt beside the body of a man who had spent 40 years in service to a family that could never fully repay him. A dragon king wept. A phoenix held him. They stayed there until the light was bright enough to chase away every shadow. Then Seraphina Vance helped Damien to his feet. He was unsteady. He was broken. But he was standing. And when he looked at her, his eyes, red-rimmed, exhausted, swimming with grief, held a determination that nothing in the world could shake. He said, "The sword can cut the HEC tame." "Yes. Then we finish this." His voice was hoarse, but steady. "For Silas, for my father, for everyone who died because of that curse. For all of us," Seraphina Vance said. Together. She picked up the ancient sword. The runes on its edge pulsed once, a soft amber light, like a heartbeat made of fire, as if recognizing her touch. A sword that had waited 1,000 years for someone worthy to wield it again. Victoria Crane was arrested 3 days later. The security footage from the parking garage, combined with months of suspicious text messages that Miles had quietly documented, was more than enough evidence. At her trial, she broke down and confessed everything. The disease, the obsidian promise of a cure, the months she had spent feeding information to the enemy. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Seraphina Vance visited her once, in the detention center. Victoria Crane looked smaller than she remembered. The bruise marks had spread to her neck and face now. The disease was in its final stages. She didn't have weeks anymore. She had days. "You could have come to us." Seraphina Vance sat on the other side of the glass, her voice quiet. "We could have helped you. The H.A. long blood, Damien's blood, might have been able to cure you. The Phoenix fire might have been able to slow the disease. Antari. You would have helped the woman who spent months making your life miserable." Victoria Crane's laugh was bitter, hollow. "The woman who kidnapped you and handed you over to a monster?" "Yes." "Why?" Seraphina Vance was silent for a moment. "Because I know what it's like to feel like you have no choices. I've been there. I made different choices, but that doesn't mean I don't understand why someone might make the wrong ones." "Yeah, me." Victoria Crane stared at her for a long time. Then, so quietly the microphone barely picked it up, "I'm sorry. I know it doesn't change anything. But I am. Intermuan. I know." Seraphina Vance stood. "Goodbye, Victoria." She didn't look back. Some wounds couldn't be healed. Some betrayals couldn't be undone. But the woman who had been a disowned heiress, who had rebuilt her life from nothing, who had learned to create fire from love rather than rage, she had learned something else too. Forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. And moving forward didn't mean pretending the past hadn't happened. It meant choosing, every day, to be better than the people who had hurt you. 1 month later, Silas's funeral was held in the private garden of House Drake. The garden had been his domain for 40 years. Every tree, every flower, every carefully placed stone path bore the imprint of his care. Now it was filled with mourners, the senior leadership of Dragon Holdings, representatives from the HAA Long Clan's allies, and a surprising number of ordinary employees who had encountered Silas in the elevators and corridors and been touched by his quiet kindness. Damien delivered the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a simple black suit, his voice steady despite the shadows under his eyes. The black veins on his left arm, the HEC, long, VN's final curse, were still visible, faint lines spreading toward his shoulder. But he stood straight. And he spoke. Silas served House Drake for 40 years. He was a butler, a bodyguard, a teacher, a father to a boy who had lost his own. He paused, his jaw tightening. "He saved my life more times than I can count. The last time, he gave his life to protect our home. There is no debt I can repay. There are no words that are adequate." Nyari, Nanti. He looked up from his notes and met the eyes of the assembled mourners. So I will not try to repay him with words. I will repay him with action. The curse that killed my father, that Silas spent his life fighting against, will be broken. I swear this on his memory. Boy. After the ceremony, Seraphina Vance stood at the front of the main hall of Dragon Holdings, facing the entire board of directors, the senior leadership, and a crowd of employees that filled every available space. She wore a white suit, simple, elegant, nothing like the drab office attire she had worn for 3 years. On her lapel was a tiny phoenix pin, silver and sapphire. A gift from Damien. Effective today. Her voice rang out, clear and unwavering. I officially assume the position of Vice President of Dragon Holdings, overseeing strategic development and human resources. Applause filled the hall. Genuine applause, not the polite golf clapping of corporate events. These were people who had watched Seraphina Vance rise from administrative assistant to the executive suite in a matter of months. People who had heard the rumors. People who had seen the impossible. The frozen CEO smiling. The ordinary woman who had captured his heart. The dragon that had launched itself from the rooftop of the Grand Celestial Hotel in full view of half the city. The secret was out. The world knew about dragon shifters now, at least in fragments. There were news reports, conspiracy theories, government inquiries. Damien had spent the past month managing the fallout. Press conferences, closed-door meetings with officials, careful negotiations with the other clans. The 1,000-year code of silence was broken. There was no going back. But perhaps that was for the best. Secrecy had protected the dragon shifters for centuries, but it had also allowed the HEC Longvien to operate in the shadows, building his obsidian network without interference. Sunlight was the best disinfectant. After the ceremony, Seraphina Vance found Damien waiting in the lobby. He had traded his usual black suit for a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The violet veins on his arm were visible now. He no longer tried to hide them. Let the world see what he was. He was done pretending. "Madam Vice President," he said, and his voice held the ghost of a smile. "Mr. Jury." CEO. She walked to his side, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "You look like you haven't slept." Haven't. The Thian Long clan sent another message this morning. They want to meet. They say the destruction of the Obsidian stronghold has shifted the balance of power, and they're concerned about what it means. What do they want? An alliance. Or war. They haven't decided yet. He rubbed his temples. Also, a delegation from the European Dragon Council is arriving next week. And the government wants a formal hearing on the whole dragon people living among humans situation. And the stock price dropped 3% this morning because investors are still spooked by the fact that their CEO can turn into a giant fire-breathing reptile. Seraphina Vance took his hand, the hand that had trembled 3 years ago in a bar, that had held her through the second bond, that had fought with her through the third bond. The birthmark on her wrist flared warm. One thing at a time. We survived a 1,000-year curse, and an 800-year-old dragon, Lord. We can handle a few board meetings. Easy anyway. It's not the board meetings I'm worried about. His expression darkened. The HCC, TAM. We still haven't found it. Silas said it was beneath the old city, but the underground facility doesn't go deep enough. We've been searching for 3 weeks. Anzuri, Then we'll keep searching. We'll dig until we find it. What if we don't? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the fear he had been hiding all month. Beneath the board meetings and the press conferences and the careful diplomacy. The terror that the curse would win. That everything Silas had sacrificed would be for nothing. Seraphina Vance reached up and placed her palm against his cheek. The phoenix fire responded. Soft, warm, a gentle blue glow that pushed back the darkness in his veins. We will find it. You and me. Together. That's what Silas believed. That's what your father believed. That's what I believe. Can you and Eller and stand? I don't deserve you. Maybe not, but you're stuck with me anyway. She kissed his cheek. Come on, Dragon King. We've got work to do. They walked out of Dragon Holdings together, into the late afternoon sun. Around them, the city of Ashvale hummed with life, traffic, pedestrians, the distant sound of construction. A city that had recently learned that dragons were real, that ancient bloodlines shaped the world from the shadows, that the woman who had once been a disowned heiress was now the second most powerful person in the most powerful company. Ahead of them lay uncertainty. The HAC Tam, hidden somewhere in the depths beneath the city. The Thean Long clan, watching and waiting. The black veins on Damien's arm, slowly spreading. 1,000 problems, 1,000 battles yet to be fought. But Seraphina Vance, who had been told she wasn't good enough, who had lost everything and rebuilt it from nothing, who had discovered she was the fated one of a dragon king, was not afraid. She had faced darkness and transformed it into light. She had loved a man who was half fire, and taught him that fire could be more than destruction. She had not married the CEO. She had become something far more powerful, his equal, his partner, his shield. And somewhere beneath the city, in a chamber that had waited 500 years for this moment, the darkness of the HEC Tam pulsed once, and for the first time in its existence, felt something that might have been fear. The phoenix had risen. The dragon had found his mate. And together, they would burn away every shadow that stood in their path. The end. Dragon CEO, version 3.